The woman in first class didn't even look up properly. She just glanced at Muhammad Ali's clothes, then at his face, and her expression instantly changed into disgust. She leaned back in her seat, crossed her arms, and said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Excuse me, you're in the wrong section." Muhammad Ali slowly turned his head toward her. Calm eyes, relaxed posture, no anger. He smiled politely. "I'm sorry?" The woman pointed at the aisle like she was giving an order. "This is first class. People pay real money to sit here." A few passengers nearby started watching. A businessman lowered his newspaper. A flight attendant paused mid-step. Ali didn't argue. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out his boarding pass. The woman snatched it from his hand before he could even offer it properly. She read it quickly and laughed. "Muhammad Ali?" she said, smirking. "Oh, please. Anyone can write a name." Ali's smile faded slightly, but he remained respectful. "Ma'am, that is my ticket." She scoffed and waved her hand like he was nothing. "Look, at you. You don't belong here." The cabin air suddenly felt heavy. People could sense something was wrong, but no one wanted to get involved. Ali adjusted his seatbelt slowly, like he had all the patience in the world. The woman leaned closer and whispered with bitterness, "I didn't pay for first class to sit next to someone like you." Ali's eyes narrowed slightly, not with rage, but with quiet disappointment. He took a deep breath and spoke softly. "Ma'am, I'm just here to travel like everyone else." But the woman wasn't finished. She raised her voice even louder now. "Flight attendant?" A young flight attendant hurried over with a professional smile. "Yes, ma'am, how can I help you?" The woman pointed straight at Ali. "This man needs to move, immediately." The flight attendant looked at Ali, then at the ticket still in the woman's hand. "Ma'am, his seat number is correct." The woman's face twisted in frustration. Then, "Fix it! I don't want him sitting here!" Now the entire first-class section was staring. Ali slowly stood up, not angry, not defensive, just calm. And as he stood, he said something so quiet, yet so powerful. "Some people only respect you and when they recognize you." The woman smirked. "Exactly, and I don't recognize you." Ali nodded once. Then he said, "That's about to change." And at that exact moment, the captain's voice began to echo through the cabin speakers. The captain's voice had started to come through the speakers. But before the announcement could finish, the woman interrupted again, louder than before. She leaned into the aisle, waving her hand like she owned the entire plane. "Hello? Is anyone going to do something about this?" The flight attendant's smile stayed polite, but her eyes showed discomfort. "Ma'am, please lower your voice. We are about to take off." But Karen didn't care. She pointed toward the back of the plane and said, "He needs to go back there. I don't know what kind of airline this is, but first class is for respectable people." Muhammad Ali stood quietly beside his seat, not saying a word. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't shaken. He had been in front of thousands of screaming fans, angry opponents, and brutal critics. One rude passenger wasn't going to break him, but the situation still hurt. Because it wasn't about the seat. It was about the way she looked at him, like he didn't belong anywhere. The businessman across the aisle cleared his throat. "Ma'am, maybe just let the man sit." Karen snapped her head toward him. "Mind your business." The man immediately looked away. No one wanted to become her next target. Ali glanced around the cabin. Some people stared with pity, some looked uncomfortable, and some stayed silent out of fear. The flight attendant gently reached for the boarding pass. "Ma'am, may I see the ticket, please?" Karen held it up like she was holding evidence in court. "I'm telling you right now, this is fake. I've seen scams before. People like this sneak into places they don't belong." The flight attendant's expression tightened. She looked at the boarding pass. Then she looked at Ali. And for a moment, her eyes widened slightly. She recognized the face. She recognized the calm confidence. but she didn't want to create a scene either, so she spoke carefully. Sir, would you like to come with me for a moment? Karen smiled proudly. Finally, Ali nodded politely. Of course. He picked up his small bag and followed the flight attendant toward the front of the cabin. Karen leaned back smugly, whispering to the lady beside her. See? These people think they can sit anywhere nowadays. But the lady didn't respond. She just stared at Karen like she was watching someone dig their own grave. At the front, the flight attendant spoke in a low voice. Sir, I just want to confirm something. Ali smiled gently. You can ask. She hesitated. Are you Muhammad Ali? Ali chuckled softly, almost amused. Yes, ma'am. The flight attendant's mouth opened slightly. Oh my God. Her hands trembled. She quickly covered her mouth, trying not to scream. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you were on this flight. Ali's expression stayed warm. No need to apologize. You did nothing wrong. The flight attendant looked back toward Karen, then back at Ali. She's causing a disturbance. If you want, we can move you to another seat. We can even arrange a private cabin section. Ali shook his head slowly. No. I chose that seat. The flight attendant swallowed nervously. Sir, she insulted you. Ali's eyes softened. She insulted what she didn't understand. The flight attendant looked down, ashamed for the airline. Ali placed his hand gently on the counter beside him. Let me ask you something. Yes, sir? He looked toward the first-class passengers. Do you think people like her act this way only on planes? The flight attendant didn't answer because the truth was obvious. Ali continued, calm but serious now. She's not angry at me. She's angry at the idea that someone like me could sit beside her. The flight attendant's eyes became watery. Ali smiled slightly. Don't worry. I've met worse. Then he leaned in and said quietly, but today, she's going to learn something. The flight attendant nodded. Yes, sir. Ali walked back toward his seat. As he approached, Karen sat up again, ready to attack. She smirked. Well? Did they remove you? Ali didn't respond. He simply sat down calmly. Karen's smile vanished. What? You're still here? Ali looked at her peacefully. Yes, ma'am. I am. Karen's voice rose again. This is ridiculous. She waved for the flight attendant. But before she could speak, the cabin speakers crackled again. The captain's voice returned, clear and loud. Ladies and gentlemen, before we take off, we'd like to welcome a very special guest on board. Karen froze. Ali remained still, and the entire first-class cabin slowly turned their heads. Because everyone knew, this announcement was about to change everything. The captain's voice echoed through the cabin speakers, smooth and confident. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 218 to Los Angeles. People settled back into their seats, expecting the usual safety speech. But then the captain paused. A long pause. The kind of pause that makes everyone look up. And before we begin our flight today, the captain continued, I would like to personally welcome a very special guest traveling with us in first class. Muhammad Ali remained calm, staring straight ahead. Karen's face stiffened. She looked around, confused, annoyed, almost offended. The captain's voice returned, louder now. Some of you may already recognize him. He is a champion, a legend, a man who represents strength, courage, and history. A few passengers began whispering. Karen leaned forward, narrowing her eyes. What is this? She muttered. Then the captain said the words that hit the cabin. Like thunder, we are honored to have Muhammad Ali on board today. For a split second, the entire first-class cabin froze. Then everything changed. A man across the aisle dropped his magazine. A woman gasped and covered her mouth. Someone in the back said loudly, "No way!" Another passenger whispered, "That's him. That's really him." Then applause began. At first it was slow, unsure. Then it grew louder, clapping, smiling, people turning around in their seats. Someone shouted, "Ali, the greatest!" The applause became a wave. A few people even stood up trying to catch a better look. Muhammad Ali finally turned his head slightly, nodding respectfully. He didn't smile like a celebrity. He smiled like a humble man who had seen too much life to be impressed by attention. Meanwhile, Karen's face went pale. Her eyes widened like she had seen a ghost. She stared at Ali. Then she stared at the other passengers clapping for him. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. For the first time since she opened her mouth, she had no words. The woman beside her leaned away slightly, uncomfortable to even be associated with her. Karen slowly looked down at the boarding pass still in her hand. The name was real. The seat was real. Everything was real. Her fingers trembled as she placed the ticket back on Ali's tray table like it was burning her skin. I didn't know, she whispered. But no one cared. People weren't looking at Ali anymore. They were looking at her, because they had all heard what she said. They had all witnessed how she treated him. The businessman who earlier tried to defend Ali now looked at Karen with disgust. Unbelievable, he muttered. Karen's cheeks turned red. She tried to laugh nervously, forcing a smile. Oh. Well, I mean, he doesn't look like... She stopped herself, because even she realized how stupid she sounded. Ali slowly turned toward her. His eyes weren't angry. They were calm, almost sad. Karen swallowed hard and leaned in, trying to recover. I didn't mean anything personal, she said quickly. You understand, right? I just thought, first class is supposed to be... Ali spoke softly. Supposed to be what? Karen blinked. I mean, you know, a certain type of environment. Ali nodded slowly. A certain type of people. Karen forced another laugh. Yes, exactly. Ali didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult her. He didn't embarrass her the way she embarrassed him. He simply looked at her with quiet honesty. And then he said, You know what's funny? Karen's eyes darted nervously. What? Ali leaned back in his seat. I've been called a lot of things in my life. Karen sat stiff like a statue. Ali continued. People called me loud, arrogant, too confident. He paused. But nobody ever called me less than human. Karen's breath caught. Her chest tightened. She tried to speak, but her throat went dry. Ali's voice stayed calm, but every word hit harder than a punch. You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask if I belonged. You just looked at me and decided I was beneath you. Karen's eyes began to water. She quickly looked away, hoping no one noticed. But everyone noticed. A young man 2 rows ahead leaned back and said loudly, That's shameful. Karen's head snapped toward him, but he didn't even look at her again. Another passenger shook his head. A woman whispered to her husband, How could she say those things? Karen felt like the whole cabin was closing in on her. She tried to breathe, but the humiliation was choking her. She leaned closer to Ali again, voice trembling. Mr. Ali, I'm sorry. Truly. I didn't recognize you. Ali looked at her with calm eyes. That's the problem. Karen blinked. Ali continued, quieter now. You shouldn't need to recognize someone to respect them. The words felt like a knife, because they were true. Karen stared at her lap, ashamed. She could hear the whispers around her. She could feel the judgment. For the first time in her life, she felt what it was like to be looked down on. The flight attendant approached, her expression serious. She leaned toward Karen. Ma'am, we've had multiple complaints about your behavior. Please remain quiet for the rest of the flight. Karen looked up quickly. What? Complaints? But the flight attendant didn't let her finish. Your behavior has been recorded. If you continue, we will have security waiting when we land. Karen's face turned white. Her hands gripped the armrests. She looked around, desperate for support. But no one defended her. No one smiled at her. No one even wanted to look at her. Then, the flight attendant turned toward Ali. Her voice softened. Mr. Ali, would you like us to move you to a different seat? We can arrange privacy immediately. Karen's heart stopped. If Ali said yes, she would be exposed even more. It would prove she was right to fear humiliation. Everyone waited. Ali paused for a moment, then he shook his head gently. No, he said. I'll stay. The cabin fell silent again. Karen slowly turned toward him, confused. Ali looked at her and spoke softly. I want you to sit here the whole flight. Karen's eyes widened. Ali continued. So you can remember. That respect isn't a privilege. It's a responsibility. Karen swallowed hard. Tears slipped down her cheek, and as the plane began to taxi toward the runway, she realized something terrifying. This flight wasn't going to be uncomfortable for Ali. It was going to be uncomfortable for her because she had insulted a legend, and now she had to sit beside him for hours, and she couldn't escape. The plane lifted into the sky. The engines roared. The city below became smaller, and the cabin lights dimmed slightly. But inside first class, the air felt heavier than the clouds outside. Karen sat stiff in her seat, her hands folded tightly on her lap like she was trying to hold herself together. She didn't look at anyone. Not Ali. Not the passengers. Not even the window. Because she could feel it. Every whisper, every stare, every silent judgment. Muhammad Ali, on the other hand, looked completely relaxed. He adjusted his seat slightly, leaned back, and stared calmly ahead like nothing happened. That calmness made Karen feel worse. Because if Ali had yelled at her, maybe she could have defended herself. If he had insulted her back, maybe she could have blamed him, but he didn't. He treated her like she was still a human being. Even after she treated him like he wasn't, a flight attendant came by offering drinks. Would you like something to drink, Mr. Ali? Ali smiled. Water is fine, thank you. Then the flight attendant turned to Karen. And for you, ma'am? Karen's voice barely came out. No. The attendant nodded and walked away. Karen swallowed hard. She could feel her heart pounding. The businessman across the aisle leaned toward Ali. Mr. Ali, I just want to say it's an honor. Ali nodded politely. Thank you, brother. The businessman hesitated, then glanced toward Karen. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Ali's face remained calm. It's not the first time. Those words were simple, but they hit the cabin harder than any argument. Karen's eyes widened slightly. Not the first time. Meaning this wasn't a one-time misunderstanding. This wasn't just a rude woman on a plane. This was something Ali had faced again and again. Karen's throat tightened. She slowly turned her head toward Ali, but Ali was looking out the window now, silent. Minutes passed. The cabin slowly returned to normal. People went back to their phones, their conversations, their coffee. But Karen couldn't. Her mind replayed every sentence she had said. You don't belong here. People like you should sit in economy. I don't want him next to me. She felt sick. Not because she got caught, but because she realized she meant it. She had spoken from a place deep inside her, a place she never wanted to admit existed. Karen took a shaky breath and leaned slightly toward Ali. Mr. Ali. Ali turned his head slowly. Yes? Karen's voice was softer now. Not demanding, not arrogant. Almost broken. I didn't recognize you. Ali didn't react. He just nodded once, waiting. Karen continued, trying to explain. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just thought. She paused. She couldn't finish, because any explanation sounded ugly. Ali finally spoke. You thought I didn't belong. Karen's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly. Yes. Ali looked at her for a moment. Not like a celebrity. Not like a champion. Like a man who had seen too much pain. Then he said quietly. You know what's sad? Karen whispered. What? Ali leaned forward slightly. I could have been a doctor. I could have been a teacher. I could have been a soldier coming home. And you still would have treated me the same. Karen's lips trembled. She covered her mouth with her hand. The truth hit her like a wave. Ali wasn't just talking about himself. He was talking about every man who looked like him, every person who had been judged before they spoke. Karen's tears started falling. She tried to wipe them quickly, embarrassed. But it was too late. The woman across the aisle saw her crying and looked away, not out of sympathy, but out of disgust. Karen felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life. Ali watched her quietly. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. Karen blinked. Ali opened it slowly. It was filled with handwritten notes. He flipped a page and said calmly, "I write down things people say to me sometimes." Karen stared. "Why?" Ali's voice stayed calm. "So I don't forget how the world can be." He looked at her. "And so I never become like them." Karen's breathing became shaky. She whispered, "Did you write down what I said?" Ali paused, then nodded. Karen's face fell. The shame was unbearable. She wanted to disappear. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. But Ali didn't answer right away. He just stared at the notebook. Then he closed it gently and said something that made Karen's chest tighten even more. "Do you know why I stayed in this seat?" Karen shook her head. Ali leaned back. "Because you needed to feel what you made me feel." Karen's voice cracked. "And what is that?" Ali looked her directly in the eyes. "Small." That one word destroyed her. Small. Karen stared down at her hands. She realized she had lived her whole life feeling powerful, because she made others feel small. And now, sitting next to Muhammad Ali, she understood what true greatness looked like. Not loud, not rude, not proud, just calm, strong, human. A few rows behind them, a young boy leaned into the aisle. He held a small paper and a pen. His mother whispered nervously, "Don't bother him." But Ali saw the boy and smiled warmly. "It's okay." The boy walked closer, eyes shining. "Mr. Ali, can I have your autograph?" Ali took the pen. "Of course, champ." He signed it and handed it back. The boy grinned. "You're my hero." Ali winked. "Then be a hero too." The boy ran back happily. Karen watched this exchange and felt her heart break again, because she realized something. Ali wasn't just famous, he was loved, and she was sitting beside him, hated by everyone around her. Then Ali turned back to Karen and said softly, "You still have time to be better." Karen looked at him stunned. You still think I can?" Ali nodded slowly. "Everyone can." Karen wiped her tears. For the first time, she didn't feel attacked. She felt exposed. And maybe that exposure was exactly what she needed. But she didn't know. The most intense moment of this flight was still coming. Because soon, the flight attendant would return. And what she was about to say would shock the entire cabin again. The cabin had finally calmed down. People returned to their drinks. Some passengers quietly smiled as they watched Muhammad Ali sign autographs for kids. Karen sat silently beside him, eyes swollen from crying. She kept her head down, like she was afraid to breathe too loudly. Muhammad Ali remained calm, not proud, not angry, just quiet, like a man who had already won battles far bigger than this one. Then suddenly, a flight attendant approached again, but this time she wasn't holding a drink tray. She was holding a small folder. Her expression was serious, and behind her stood another attendant, and behind them, a senior crew member. People noticed immediately. Whispers started again. "What's happening now?" The attendants stopped directly beside Ali. The senior crew member leaned forward politely. "Mr. Ali, we sincerely apologize for the disturbance earlier." Ali nodded. "It's all right. The crew member glanced at Karen for a moment, then back at Allie. We spoke to the captain, and the airline would like to make this right. Karen's stomach tightened. She didn't know why, but she felt fear again. The crew member opened the folder. Mr. Allie, we would like to offer you something. Allie raised an eyebrow slightly. What is it? The crew member smiled. We would like to upgrade you to our private VIP cabin in the front. People gasped. A VIP cabin? The businessman across the aisle whispered, Wow. The crew member continued. It's more private, more comfortable, and you won't have to deal with any unpleasant behavior. All eyes slowly shifted toward Karen. Karen felt her face burning. She could feel the heat of embarrassment crawl up her neck. She whispered, Oh no. The crew member added, politely but clearly, And also, we have decided that the passenger who caused this disruption, he paused and looked directly at Karen, will not be allowed to remain in first class for the remainder of the flight. Wave of silence hit the cabin. Then came a soft sound. Someone whispering, Serves her right. Karen's eyes widened in shock. She sat up straight. What? Excuse me? The crew member kept his tone professional. Ma'am, you violated airline conduct policies. You were disrespectful, disruptive, and offensive to another passenger. Karen's voice cracked. But I apologized. The crew member nodded. Yes, ma'am. But apologies don't erase behavior. Karen's breathing became fast. She looked around the cabin. No one defended her. No one spoke up. Not a single person. She turned toward Ali, desperate. Mr. Ali, please. Her voice sounded small, almost childlike. Ali stared at her quietly. Karen continued, tears returning. Please tell them it's okay. Please. The crew member waited, watching Ali. The entire cabin waited too. This was the moment. Ali could destroy her completely with one sentence. If he nodded, Karen would be walked past everyone into economy like a criminal, and she would never forget it. The crew member spoke again. Mr. Ali, would you like us to relocate you to the VIP cabin now? Ali didn't answer immediately. He looked at Karen. Her makeup was ruined. Her hands trembled. Her pride was gone. And for the first time, she didn't look powerful. She looked like a person who had finally been confronted by her own ugliness. Ali's voice finally came calm and steady. No. The crew member blinked. No, sir? Ali shook his head. I'll stay here. Karen's eyes widened. The cabin murmured again. The crew member looked confused. But sir, we can give you complete privacy. Ali lifted his hand gently. I appreciate it. Then he looked toward Karen again. And I don't need privacy. The crew member hesitated. Sir? Are you sure? Ali nodded. Yes. Karen exhaled in relief. But it didn't last, because Ali turned his head slightly and said something she wasn't ready to hear. But she will move. Karen froze. The crew member's expression became firm again. Yes, sir. Karen's mouth opened. What? Ali didn't look angry. He didn't raise his voice, but his words were sharp and final. You told me I didn't belong here. So now? He paused. You can sit somewhere else. Karen's eyes filled with tears again. The cabin stayed silent. She whispered, I didn't mean it like that. Ali leaned back calmly. But you said it. The crew member gestured toward the aisle. Ma'am, please gather your belongings. Karen sat there shaking. She looked around, and for the first time in her life, she felt what it meant to be judged, to be watched, to be whispered about. She slowly stood up, grabbing her handbag with trembling hands. She tried to walk with dignity, but her legs were weak. As she stepped into the aisle, the passengers didn't clap. They didn't cheer, but their silence was louder than any insult. Karen walked past row after row, feeling every eye on her. A woman in business clothes leaned toward her husband and whispered, That's what happens when you treat people like trash. Karen kept walking, head down, cheeks burning. When she reached economy, the flight attendant pointed to an empty middle seat. Karen stared at it like it was punishment. A cramped middle seat, surrounded by strangers. The flight attendant spoke, quietly. "This is your new seat, ma'am." Karen swallowed hard and sat down slowly. She looked around. Nobody knew what happened. Nobody cared who she was, and for the first time, Karen realized something terrifying. In economy, she wasn't special. She was just another person. And suddenly she understood what Ali meant. First class was never about money, it was about character. Back in first class, Ali sat calmly. The crew member nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Mr. Ali." Ali smiled. "No problem." Then he whispered softly, almost to himself, "Sometimes people need to lose comfort to learn respect." And at that moment, Karen sat in the middle seat in economy, staring at the floor, knowing her life would never feel the same again. Karen sat frozen in the middle seat of economy. Her expensive perfume didn't matter here. Her jewelry didn't shine the same. Her designer handbag was squeezed between her feet like it was just another bag. Around her were tired travelers, families, students, and working people. Nobody cared who she was. Nobody looked at her like she was important. And for the first time in her life, Karen felt invisible. She stared at the tray table in front of her, her hands trembling slightly. The humiliation replayed in her head again and again. Every word she had said, every laugh, every look of disgust. Now she understood what it felt like, when people looked at you like you were unwanted. A young mother sitting by the window struggled to calm her crying baby. The baby kept pulling her hair, screaming loudly. Karen's first instinct was to roll her eyes. Her old self wanted to complain. She almost opened her mouth, but then she stopped, because she realized this was exactly how she used to act, like the world owed her silence and comfort. The mother whispered softly, exhausted, "I'm sorry. He's been crying since morning." Karen looked at the woman. The mother looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days. Her clothes were simple. Her hands were shaking from holding the baby too long. And suddenly Karen remembered the way she looked at Ali, like he wasn't first class. Karen's throat tightened. She swallowed, hard, and spoke quietly. "It's okay." The mother blinked, surprised. Karen hesitated, then added softly, "Do you want me to hold him for a minute? Just so you can breathe?" The mother stared at her like she couldn't believe what she heard. Then she slowly nodded. "If you don't mind." Karen carefully reached out. The baby screamed at first. Karen flinched, but then she gently rocked him, awkwardly at first. Then, more naturally, the baby slowly calmed down. The mother exhaled like she was finally alive again. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know how much that means." Karen's eyes watered, because those words felt real, not like compliments she received in first class. This gratitude was different. It was human. A man sitting in the aisle seat watched Karen. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, wearing a simple jacket. He noticed her shaking hands. He noticed her red eyes. After a moment, he asked calmly, "You okay, ma'am?" Karen forced a smile. "Yes, I'm fine." The man didn't buy it. He leaned back and said quietly, "You look like someone who just learned a hard lesson." Karen froze. She turned slowly. "What?" The man gave a small smile. "I saw what happened in first class." Karen's face turned pale again. You saw?" The man nodded. "I heard every word." Karen felt her stomach drop. She whispered, ashamed, "I didn't know who he was." The man shook his head gently. "That's not the worst part." Karen's eyes filled again. "I know," the man continued, voice calm but serious. "I've been in that man's position. Not because I'm famous, but because I'm black." Karen's breathing stopped. The man looked straight ahead. I've been told to move. I've been told I don't belong. I've been stared at like I'm a threat. He paused, then looked at Karen. And I'll tell you something, Karen whispered. What? The man leaned closer. The worst part isn't the words. It's the confidence people have when they say them. Karen lowered her head. Tears slipped down her cheeks again. I'm sorry, she whispered. I really am. The man nodded slowly. I can see that. Karen looked up, confused. You can? The man pointed at the baby in her arms. You didn't have to help that mother. You didn't have to hold that child. But you did. Karen looked down at the baby. The baby was sleeping now, resting peacefully. Karen's voice cracked. I don't know why I acted like that. The man smiled sadly. Yes, you do. Karen's chest tightened. She whispered, I thought I was better than him. The words felt disgusting leaving her mouth, but they were true. The man didn't judge her. He simply nodded. Yeah. Karen wiped her tears quickly. I've never said that out loud before, the man replied. Most people don't, they just live it. Karen stared at the seat in front of her. Then she whispered, I want to apologize to him. Properly. The man leaned back. You should? Karen hesitated. But he probably hates me. The man shook his head. That man doesn't hate easily. Karen swallowed. How do you know? The man smiled. Because I met him once. Karen's eyes widened. You met Muhammad Ali? The man nodded. Years ago. I was a security officer at an arena. He was surrounded by important people. But he still stopped, shook my hand, and asked my name. Karen's lips trembled. That's unbelievable. The man smiled. That's why people call him the greatest. Karen looked down again. Her voice broke completely. I treated him like trash. The man didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. Minutes passed. Karen sat silently, holding the sleeping baby. Then she handed the baby back to the mother. Carefully, the mother smiled warmly. Thank you again. Karen nodded, and as the mother turned away, Karen felt something she had never felt in first class. Not power, not pride, but humility. She looked out the window, clouds everywhere, and she whispered to herself, I was the problem. Back in first class, Muhammad Ali sat quietly, sipping water. Flight attendant approached him. Mr. Ali, there's a passenger in economy requesting to speak with you. Ali looked up calmly. Who? The attendant hesitated. The woman from earlier. Ali paused for a long moment. Then he nodded. Tell her she can come. The flight attendant walked away. And in economy. Karen stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak. Her heart pounded. She walked toward first class again, but this time not with arrogance, this time with fear and with shame, because she wasn't walking back as a queen. She was walking back as someone asking for mercy. As Karen reached the curtain dividing economy and first class, the flight attendant opened it, and Karen stepped through. Her eyes immediately found Ali. He looked at her calmly and said, Sit down. Karen slowly sat in the empty seat across the aisle. Her hands shook. Ali stared at her quietly. And then he asked one simple question. Why are you here? Karen swallowed hard. And the next words she spoke would decide whether she truly changed or whether she was only sorry because she got caught. Karen sat quietly across from Muhammad Ali, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her pride was gone. Her arrogance had been stripped away, layer by layer, like peeling paint from an old wall. For the first time, she truly understood the weight of her own behavior. Ali looked at her calmly. Not with anger, not with judgment. Just with the quiet strength that had made him the greatest, you know, he said softly. It's easy to judge someone when you don't know their story. It's easy to look at someone and decide they don't belong. It's easy to feel powerful when you're sitting in the wrong seat, but the right place in life. Karen swallowed hard. She nodded slowly. I see that now, she whispered. Ali continued, his voice steady and sincere. Respect isn't something you earn by money. It isn't something you earn by status. It's something you give freely to everyone. The cabin was silent. Even the passengers around them seemed to sense the weight of his words. Not a whisper, not a movement, just the quiet hum of engines and the realization that they were witnessing a life lesson. Ali leaned back slightly and smiled faintly. You see, ma'am, people will test you. They will challenge your patience. Some will do it out of arrogance, some out of ignorance. But your true character, it's revealed in those moments. Karen's voice cracked. I've never felt so small in my life, she admitted. And yet, for the first time, I feel like I understand what it means to be human. Ali nodded. Exactly. Small isn't weakness, it's humility. And humility, when paired with respect, is the mark of true greatness. Karen's eyes welled with tears. She looked around the cabin and realized that everyone had been watching, not to see Ali, but to witness her transformation. She had been loud, arrogant, and cruel. Now she was quiet, reflective, and remorseful. Ali placed a hand gently on the armrest. You've learned something today. That's what matters. Mistakes aren't the problem. Refusing to learn from them is. Karen bowed her head, taking a deep breath. I promise. I'll do better. I won't forget this lesson. Ali's smile widened. That's all anyone can ask. And remember, it's never about how many people see your actions. It's about what you do when no one's watching. Because that is when your true character shows. The flight continued in silence. But the tension had transformed into something heavier, yet lighter at the same time. Karen felt it in her chest, a mix of shame and clarity, embarrassment and gratitude. She glanced at Ali one last time. He was calm, serene, silent yet louder than anyone could ever be. A man who didn't need to prove power through intimidation, fame, or wealth. A man who commanded respect simply by being himself. Karen finally whispered, softly enough for only herself to hear. Thank you. Ali nodded once, faintly as if to say, You don't need to thank me. You just need to remember, and with that, the lesson was complete. A lesson not taught with anger or punishment, not with shame or humiliation, but with patience, dignity, and quiet authority. The moral was clear. Respect isn't reserved for the famous. It isn't reserved for the rich. It is earned by every interaction, every moment, and every choice. And humility, true humility, transforms not only the one who practices it, but everyone who witnesses it. Karen sat back, reflecting, changed forever. The plane hummed along above the clouds. Passengers went about their business. But one woman had learned a lesson louder than any announcement, any applause, or any confrontation. The person you look down on today might be the one you admire tomorrow. Muhammad Ali, calm as ever, leaned back and closed his eyes. The cabin around him returned to normal. But the lesson lingered, long after the flight, long after the plane landed, and long after Karen would ever forget. If you believe humility and respect are the greatest strength a person can have, type respect in the comments. And share where you're watching from. I want to honor every soul learning the power of kindness.